The trend we've seen in the last century is one of warming. We know that globally and in North America, climate has warmed. Not a huge amount, but it's warmed about a degree in the last 100 years. Since the Little Ice Age ended, climate's warmed by that amount. That has had a huge impact on glaciers. As I say, glaciers are very sensitive to even modest changes in climate. And that amount of warming has driven glaciers back. It's driven alpine glaciers back. And in some situations, glaciers have lost 50% or more of their mass just as a result of that modest warming over the last 100 years. And there have been instances where some glaciers have just disappeared completely. I mentioned Mount Kilimanjaro. The snows of Kilimanjaro, they're actually glaciers at the crest of Kilimanjaro. And at present rates, those glaciers are going to be completely gone in another 20 years if climate continues to warm as it is. Glacier National Park in Montana, it's called Glacier National Park because it supports glaciers. Well, a lot of those glaciers are disappearing and have disappeared. And again, if this warming trend continues, they will be lost as well. Now, that doesn't mean that all glaciers on Earth are going to disappear. Some are more sensitive. The small ones, the ones that are kind of clinging to existence, are the ones that are disappearing right now. But all through the world, geologists have documented this retreat in response to a modest amount of warming. And the concern is, the predictions that the atmospheric scientists make is that that warming is going to continue and maybe accelerate, that we could be looking at average global temperatures several degrees warmer than they are today by the middle or end of this century. Remains to be seen, but it seems like the trend is going to continue. So we're going to continue to see this retraction of glaciers. They're going to increasingly melt. They've documented some shrinkage on the Greenland ice sheet, which is even more of a concern because this is a large body of frozen water. And if that becomes unhealthy and begins to retreat, you begin to have an impact on sea level. And what you're doing when glaciers retreat is you're transferring that melted ice back to the sea, and it causes the seas to rise. And we know today from measurements of the sea surface that the sea is rising, and a tiny little amount, it's a couple of millimeters per year, just a tiny little amount. And you'd say, well, what's the big deal? If you extrapolate that over a significant period of time, then it becomes more than just a tiny amount. It becomes a measurable, a significant amount. And sea level rise is a concern in low-lying areas. There are many countries around the world that are at sea level. Bangladesh, I think a significant percentage of the landmass of Bangladesh is within a meter or two of sea level. So when you talk about even raising sea level a modest amount, you begin to dislocate people. You begin to introduce all sorts of problems. So a possible consequence of this warming that we're going to experience and the shrinkage of glaciers is impact on humans through sea level rise. Big concern. And it's even a concern in North America and in Europe, because you think about it, all the development that we have put in place on our coasts has been done with the assumption that sea level doesn't change other than the annual or the daily ebb and flow of tides. But all that development would be affected if the sea surface were to be higher than it is today, say a meter or so. You have wharfs, you have docks, you have people building beachfront houses. If you raise sea level even a meter, you begin to have consequences for all that infrastructure. So even in a developed country where presumably you can take measures to deal with the problem, you have a big economic consequences to that. So what seemingly is kind of an academic subject actually has some very important social and political and economic implications as well.